Hello, I'm Mandi McLeod. Welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. In this week's show, India, free trade or foul? Will the benefits of a free trade agreement with India outweigh our moral indignation over child labour? And will our cows become sacred deities? Betting the farm, with 64% of farm debt held by the dairy industry, what will changes by the Reserve Bank to levels of capital required by banks to back agricultural lending mean for growth in this sector? And it's a $100 million industry, yet its very success could see it shut down. We look at the possum fibre trade and the issues of sustainability and growth in this little-known furry profit centre. Joining me today is James Thomas, farm consultant from Morrinsville, and rural journalist and communications guru David Anderson. Welcome. James, as New Zealand keys itself up for a free trade agreement with India, what do you see happening to agriculture?
Well, there's obviously huge benefits to agriculture in terms of opening up a free trade agreement with India. I mean, I think at the moment $50 million is the dairy trade with India, and projected to balloon out to $1 billion. And it's extraordinary, the advantages for the dairy industry and New Zealand as a whole by tapping into that market.
David, what about the issues of child labour and poverty?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think all sort of free trade agreements have some issues with them. I think there was a similar issue around the Chinese one. Mm-hmm. And I understand that the government are aware of that and they're trying to rectify any sort of issues around that. I mean, I think that'll be a very important point to make sure that we are clear of that sort of issue.
Why do you think it's actually become more of an issue with India than what it was, say, with China? Is it because we're more aware, or...?
It's probably more well known in India, but I understand that it was an issue in China as well. So I think it's just one of those sort of almost cliches of Indian trade with Chinese. I mean, there's no doubt there is some issue with child labour, but it's only a small part of it. And I don't know how big it's in the dairy sector or the agricultural sector. Probably a lot smaller than other areas like manufacturing. And that sort
yes, certainly from what I've seen. James, we know that cows are pretty sacred in India. Are they going to expect our cows to become walking deities?
Oh, as a dairy farmer as well as a farm consultant, Mandy, I find cows fairly sacred animals in New Zealand too. And I think, to be honest, I think our Animal Welfare Act stands up against most international scrutiny. So I don't have a problem there. I think we treat them well.
So they're not going to be turning on the tables and say you're squealing at us about child labour, but have a look at your animal welfare. You don't think it's going to be an issue? They're not going to worry that our cows don't live out a peaceful, happy life on...
Oh, my ones do. So no, I don't. I don't believe so. I think we have very high standards.
David, are there any potential downsides that you can see from a potential free trade agreement with India?
Not offhand. I mean, I think it's all, as James said before, I think it's all upside, really. I mean, taking the potential that he said the dairy industry currently trade with India, 54 million, I think it is,
somewhere in that order,
up to the potential to go up to 1.5 billion. I mean, that is just huge. And as long as we have certain aspects in place about it, I think it's there can only be upside for it. I mean, there might be some things on the fringes, but I'm sure that'll come out in the negotiation.
I want to talk about growth because the Reserve Bank has just announced that it's going to put tougher lending criteria on our banks. Do you think this is going to slow growth, or is that just going to make it farmers have to become better at budgeting and doing their business systems? James?
Well, you must remember also that there's more criteria around the lending, sure, but there's also what we've got also is that farm prices have recorrected. So in fact the capital needed to expand has actually dropped away as well. So I don't think it's necessary. My personal opinion is I don't think it'll actually slow it down. I just think people will need to do their sums carefully and they'll need to work through their risk management, but there's still a huge opportunity for growth.
David, 10% of dairy farmers hold 45% of the dairy debt. Do you think that this change to the Reserve Bank lending criteria for banks is going to make it harder for them, or no change?
Well, I guess the banks are going to look at each issue on its own merits, I guess, and a lot of those that 10% you talk about, they're highly geared, but I'm sure the banks have done their numbers on that to make sure that they're a reasonable going concern. I mean, it's interesting to see that there's sort of talk about the agricultural sector, but I still see, I saw this morning banks doing 5% loan on houses, and how productive is that compared to dairy sector or dairy farming? So, I would suggest that it's all pretty worked out pretty well, and I don't think it's going to be a big issue really.
Right, so you don't see it. You don't see that with, I guess, the talks of the free trade agreement and I guess the dairy being talked up, that people are going to go out and start, paying silly money for farms again. That's not going to happen. James?
Not in the short term, Mandy. No, as we've already alluded to, I mean, there are more restrictions in place, and banks have become more risk averse, especially compared to about 3 years ago.
What about new entrants coming in? Is it going to make it harder for them?
Again, criteria changed, smaller steps to do so. I don't believe there's any more hurdles in place than what there has been.
No, and the land prices have come back, haven't they, from that time? So.
Yeah, absolutely.
You say they've come back, but they're not actually shifting, though, are they?
Well, they are in terms of what was paid, like I say, in the boom, if you like, 07, 08 in particular.
But James, farm sales have really slowed, if not stopped.
Yes, they have.
Whilst we've seen a correction come back,
yeah,
we're not actually seeing too many people going out and either buying them or selling them.
Well, again, if it's a little hard if you want to exit the industry and you think, well, hey, my farm was worth here, and now it's actually worth there. There's going to be a natural reluctance to put that farm on the market. But again, when people come to terms with the new criteria, the new marketplace, I think it'll start moving again as we've always seen it in the past.
Yeah, and I think it's similar. Look at the property market and house sales. I mean, they've flatlined as well. So I think it's just right across the whole economy, and it'll go again. Yeah.
So you think that perhaps the banks could have done this a couple of years ago?
Well, done what?
Tightened up their criteria, I guess. Would that have stopped the bubble?
We're all pretty smart in hindsight, aren't we?
Exactly.
Speak for yourself there, James. Now, speaking of being smart, 2 million possums are harvested each year for a $100 million industry. Yet the possum hunters are struggling to get access to dock land. What do you think about this?
I can't understand why they are not getting access to dock land. I mean, dock are probably not well known as a great landlord of looking after weeds and pests. So I have seen a bit of news about that. So it's interesting. I can understand some of the reluctance to let. There was some talk about not wanting to wipe out the whole population because they need to have a base population, which seemed a funny answer to me. I mean, I think possums are a pest and should be wiped out completely.
My understanding was that the argument was exactly that the possum hunters wouldn't have a drive to annihilate the possum populations because it's such a lucrative industry. And that was the rationale behind it.
What's the possum population? It's 100x million. I mean, I don't think they're going to get near it at 2 million a year. It's not going to even touch the sides.
No, and I mean, to me, surely if they're out there, whacking possums, it's got to be good for TB and agriculture because they'll be getting probably the ones that are more accessible or closer to farmland, surely.
Yeah, I guess that's the case. Now they have had bounties in the past, have they not?
Yeah.
And so why that didn't work in the time, but I guess you're right. You're not going to necessarily kill and probably bounty hunters, or if you like, and you said Mandy, and there is a upside to that. They'll hunt the easy ones, but they're not going to go in and necessarily troop in for 3 or 4 days.
But I understand that the fur prices have gone up. I think something from $15 a kilogram up to into the hundreds at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Don't follow that index.
So it's going nuts at the moment. But I mean, any possum hunting is only going to touch the sides. It's still the poisoning that's going to really keep the control under for TB and that sort of stuff. Yeah,
well, I say, come on, Doc. Let our possum hunters in.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, team. Coming up after the break, he's a craggy-looking man with a massive mission ahead of him. He is Bruce Wills, the new president of Federated Farmers of New Zealand. What are the challenges that lie ahead of him, and who does he have to work with to achieve the massive task of unifying the public and the producers? And what do cows and trout have in common? Very little, you may well think, but both are being blamed for the state our water is in, depending on whose side you support. And New Zealand cows are now sought after to boost Chinese milk production. Should we be selling New Zealand genetics offshore? All this coming up soon. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. In a Country 99 TV news story, Australia is facing more animal welfare pressure to stop live cattle exports, regardless of where they're headed. This has opened up a market for New Zealand dairy cattle to be exported to China and increase their per cow milk production. James, is this a good thing for our dairy industry to have an alternative market for our dairy cows?
Short answer is yes, I believe so. I think it's the positive thing is that it's showing that New Zealand genetics are the best in the world.
There is that, but is there also not a potential for cows to become more expensive and therefore make it harder, as we've talked about new entrants coming in, buying their first herd of cows? It creates another price ceiling or floor, if you like.
Cows, as you well know, fluctuate quite dramatically based on price of milk. Now, okay, that creates another market, supply and demand for animals on the ground. It may just mean, if you look at the positive spin-offs from that, it just may mean that farmers will do AB for longer, perhaps, actually rear more replacements, actually create a bigger market in New Zealand for New Zealanders, as well as that trade to China. So no, I don't see it as being a problem. We are, that's an export. Mm-hmm. Our milk products are 95% exported as well. We're tied to that. As soon as milk prices fall, cow prices fall, it's market forces.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that we will suffer the same accusations from animal welfare groups sending live cattle to China, even though they are not destined to be slaughtered, as what's happened in Australia, David?
Well, it's completely different. I think these cattle are going into dairy farms, so I think we have to be careful to make sure that at the other end that the proper animal welfare aspects are in place. But I'm pretty sure that the exporters or importers, Fonterra's done a lot up there, and they're pretty big on the sustainability and making sure that they're perceived better in the marketplace and that sort of thing. So I think we're talking apples on apples here in relation to the cattle trade from Indonesia to Australia to our trade in China.
I agree. We've got purpose-built chips for a purpose-built reason. You're not going to put high genetic merit cows at risk. Why would you come and pay good money only to mistreat them on the way? It doesn't make any sense at all, and we wouldn't be involved with it if that was the case.
So I guess then it's up to us to make sure we sell a story of exactly what you've said, James, and be proactive out there rather than being reactive and waiting for potential accusations to come. Yeah,
it's a good news story. I don't see a downside to it, and I think we have to approach it that way. It's tiring people always taking the negative of good news. Let's celebrate it.
Absolutely.
I think it is a good news story, in fact, that we can be taking our animal welfare ideas to places like China where it may have a lower level and we can actually set more of a standard for them. So it is a good story.
It does, yeah.
That's awesome. Bruce Wills, the new face of Federated Farmers. David.
Yeah, well, he first job may need to get a makeover if you're calling him Craggy.
In the most positive sense.
Yeah. My understanding is that Bruce comes from a business background. I think he was a rural banker or something for a year. So I think it's a positive thing for Federated Farmers. No disrespect to the previous guys, but the last two presidents, Charlie Peterson and Don Nicholson, were very forthright in their opinions. And I know that Bruce has come out and said that he wants to engage urban New Zealand more, which is fantastic, because I think that's something the Federated Farmers need to do. In fact, wider agribusiness Inc. New Zealand needs to do. I think get engaged more with the wider population to let New Zealand know what the industry provides for them and how important it is to our economy.
So what do you think the issues are that he's going to have to tackle first? When you've mentioned connecting with the urban sector, do you think there are a number of bridges that have to be rebuilt?
Yeah, I think absolutely. People, back in the day, everyone had an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent who had a farm. They don't have it this day. There's a real disconnect there. So I think he has to get in and prove that farmers aren't these sort of ecological damaging sort of don't care about anything. Cows crapping in rivers and that sort of stuff that really gains all the bad headlines. But it's not true, And I think as well as reinforcing that farmers pay tax, they're a big part of all that sort of stuff. They get all this negativity that's coming out, and really go for the positive about what agriculture provides for the country and for people in New Zealand. Yeah.
And they've got to be shown to work on all sides of the political spectrum too. That's very important. What was that comment the other day about Feds being the National Party in gumboots? That's old.
It's mischievous, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's not helpful.
Someone actually said they were acting gumboots. It was a misnomer.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah.
Well, I was at the Feds conference, and I have to say they gave all four parties a pretty good crack at telling their story. So,
and they have to. I mean,
Yes.
they have to work across that divide because no matter what's happening at the moment, one day Labor or a left leaning will be in power, and they need to work with them. So that's just sensible.
what do you think the first topic or issue that they need to address in that good news sector?
I think it's just continuing some of the work that the previous administration has done. E.g., I think you're alluding to the rivers and the streams and that sort of stuff. Those are really important aspects, and we've got to be shown, we being New Zealand agriculture, to being proactive with these things, and I think the feds have a real leadership role with that.
Yep. Just coming back to that, you talked about the urban, rural divide. Do you think that agriculture, and more specifically dairying, is in danger, David, of becoming a monoculture in New Zealand?
Yeah, well, I see it as, federated farmers have got to play a part in getting Agribusiness Inc. a wider view. Fonterra do. Meat and Wool New Zealand, or Beef and Lamb, whatever they call themselves these days, the Kiwi Fruit Board, Apple and Pear New Zealand, they all need to, I think, join together and show that, how wide and diverse the sector is, and that it comes from all aspects. And we've talked about federated farmers before. I think a real key point for them is to not always be negative. When there's an issue of sustainability being raised, to say, yeah, we may have a problem, we need to look at that, rather than saying it doesn't exist or don't dare do that, because that gets people offside. Because there are examples of it.
But do you think we're in danger of having too many eggs in one basket in terms of, I guess, the New Zealand economy with its reliance on agriculture, and then within agriculture our reliance on the dairy industry?
Why? I mean, we're excellent at that. I mean, why should we hide from that or not do it? I mean, Finland are very good at making Nokia phones, and that's about all they do, I think. So I mean, why? Dairy, agriculture and dairy in particular is what we're very good at. It earns us the vast bulk of our export income. We would be silly to, we should diversify, no worries, but I do not think that we should be resigning from that fact.
We've certainly shown without a shadow of a doubt that we're not a sunset industry, as was trumpeted for many years, which I always found amusing at the time and slightly annoying. But, no, I mean, celebrate what we're good at. There's other parts of New Zealand that maybe need to lift their game, and there are plenty of other export opportunities and economic opportunities in New Zealand outside farming. But I make no apologies for farming leading the way.
You don't think that, I'm talking about dairying at the moment. You don't think that with all of the upside and the dairy payout and things like that, and the competition for resources, it makes it harder for some of the other industries who maybe are not experiencing such a buoyant time, who have to compete with us for resources, that's a concern or an issue that...
It's always an issue, I think, but you've got to go where the market is at the moment, and dairy's strong, and red meat's coming back very strongly just recently. So let's just carry on with that. I mean, there'll be changes between the industry. Some people might convert back to sheep. Who knows? I mean, if it carries on like that, I mean, there's been a big conversion back to dairy, but that balance is going to be there all the time. But I think our strong point is turning grass into protein, and we should carry on doing that.
It's market forces, isn't it? And again, don't apologise if you can outcompete with a competitor.
Absolutely.
So James, I look forward to seeing the time when you convert your farm back from dairy into sheep, and having to ring you and say, get those sheep off my farm, rather than the other way around.
Do a bit of stock-proof fencing or sheep-proof fencing.
I think we could do that anyway, thanks. Coming up after the break, we asked David and James, what's got them hopping? Is it going to be a rant or will it be a rave? Find out after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. It's time now for our weekly rant or rave. Who wants to go first? Come on, James.
I'm being looked at. I'll do the rave thing, although I hate that word because it sounds like a teenager going on some sort of a dance party. But
are you not a teenager, James?
No, maybe mentally, but certainly not physically, as you can tell. Ray, I guess I've been trying to accentuate the positive, so let's go down that track. We've just had the Young Farmer Contest at Masterton at the weekend. Yes. And fantastic. We're talking about the good stuff of New Zealand agriculture. There's 7 young people I think 6 of them with university degrees, not all agricultural degrees either, showing that to succeed in agriculture, you have to be smart, you have to be driven and focused and fantastic. Take my hat off to them. I'm pleased I've retired.
I was just going to say, James, because you were a previous winner of...
No, alas, no. Second.
Second.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's all right. You've still got your passion, enthusiasm, and
yeah, and
I was going to say your mental stamina, but I thought, I thought, maybe I shouldn't be trying to suck up to you too much.
No. Young Farmers was a fantastic organisation to be involved with, and I was lucky enough to carry on into the management side of things with the contest, and it's fantastic to see it just progressing from year to year.
Oh, and absolutely congratulations to Will Grayling, who was this year's winner, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Good Waikato boy, so that's brilliant.
Alas, he was a Raggy boy, in fact, Will Grayling.
But he's come from the Waikato.
I don't know where he's come from, but he's representing Aorangi.
Parents live just outside Hamilton.
Oh, there you go.
Yes,
okay.
So we're going to keep him close to home.
So we're going to claim him as well as Aorangi?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, well that's fine. I'm happy with that.
David, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going to have a rave too, actually, on the positive side. I just see that Fonterra's Every Farm Every Year program, they've just come out after done a year's audit of going around all their farms, and I think that's fantastic. That's shown how they're front footing an issue, which is perceived as a problem in the industry about sustainability and water quality and that sort of stuff. So for them to get out, do that, and put a report out and tackle farmers that are having issues to help them out, and they've got their sustainability experts there. So I'd say that's great stuff.
I'm going to have another rave, so we might as well all be raving together. Way, yay! I'm going to have a rave about federated farmers bringing a new era of competency, business acumen to the board. I think it's, as you say, James, it's an inexperienced board, but it's going to be led by two very capable people who actually have had a business life in a previous existence, if you like. And I think that it's time for a change within Feds, and I'm really looking forward to it.
And also their first woman on the board.
Oh,
as well.
I know, isn't that great?
There you go.
Yeah,
it's changing the guard.
It's definitely changing the guard. We'll see a woman president there yet.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, coming back to what you were saying about the Fonterra report, where do you see that going with other industries? Like dairy gets quite a hard rap with dirty dairying. Now, I'm sure it's just because it's very good alliteration.
Yeah.
But where are the other industries going to go?
They have to do the same thing, and they are. I mean, it's pretty well recognised within the agriculture industry that sustainability is a big part. We've talked about the Clean Green New Zealand, which is maybe a bit of a fallacy, a bit of a tourism marketing point. But the thing is that people like fresh, green New Zealand, so they have to be into that space as well.
Well, you see, it's interesting because when I was down at the Feds conference, they were talking about who is to blame for our waterways being the state they're in. And if you'd listened to Lachlan McKenzie, it was to do with our introduced aquatic species, trout, etc. If you listen to the Green Party, aka Russell Norman and Dr. Mike Joy, who's actually from Massey University, but was a Green Party member, it's cows. So it's quite a concern that we've got a bit of a divergence of opinion, all the blame going on, but there's no solutions. Yeah,
that's a lot of the problem. Is a lot of screaming from the sidelines.
Yeah.
And in the middle, where the action needs to be taken, that's where we need to reclaim that space and actually say, yes, we recognise the problem, we're doing something about it, and that this Every Farm Every Year program by Fonterra is part of that.
Yeah.
Look at the change in the last 10 years. I mean, even in the last year, Canterbury dairy farmers have improved. What was it, 59%? Have basically lifted their game into full compliance, and I think that's tremendous, and it's showing that we are working. What we need to do though is make sure that any science attached to what is the water quality we were aiming for. Is it virgin water quality pre-European, or is it most polluted water in the world? Where is the science pointing to what we have to aim for, and let's aim for it.
Yeah, it was interesting. Someone was telling me that they read an article about the Waikato River back in the day, like we're talking, might have been early 1900s or late 1800s, and they described it as being a muddy brown river.
Well, I think you look at industry. I mean, freezing works used to just, the effluent things would used to be dumped into the sea, and that's
every dairy company.
Every dairy company. So that has changed remarkably. So I think we need to, recognise there's a problem where there is, address it, but we are not as we're not as bad as some people trying to make us out to be.
And I think maybe what we need is more communication skills from the likes of you, David, to get out there and tell our good news story and come out into the sun and stop being in the shade. We're not a sunset industry, are we, James?
We are not a sunset industry.
That wraps up our latest edition of Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'd like to thank my guests, David Anderson and James Thomas, and to you too for watching. Remember too to check out my blog online, country99tv.co.nz. I love hearing from you. I'll catch you next week, and in the meantime, keep on talking straight.